All right, let's talk about one of the biggest, sneakiest dangers in UX design, your own intuition. We're going to break down why those assumptions that feel so right can lead to designs that are just completely wrong. And more importantly, how challenging those feelings is the key to really leveling up in your career. Let's dive in. So let me just ask you this straight up. Is your gut feeling, that intuition about what users want, is it actually the biggest thing holding you back? Most failed designs don't start with bad wireframes. They start with a really good intention that just was never backed up by any evidence. So what are we even talking about here? What is an assumption? Well, it's really simple. It's just an idea we believe is true without any proof. It's that, oh, I think users will love this, or this just seems obvious moment. And these little unproven ideas, they become the shaky foundations that entire products can just collapse on. And this right here, this gets to the absolute heart of the problem. Assumptions are so dangerous, precisely because they feel so reasonable. They feel true. But in the world of UX, what feels true to you, the designer, is often a completely different universe from what is actually true for your users. Getting this distinction is, well, it's everything. So why is this intuition trap so common, especially for designers who are just starting out? Honestly, it's totally natural. We rely on our own judgment to get by. But there is a massive difference between how a beginner thinks and how a real pro operates. This chart really says it all, doesn't it? Beginners often feel like, research is just going to slow me down, or asking users is awkward, and hey, my own experience should be good enough. But the pros, they know better. They understand that designing for yourself is literally the fastest way to fail, and that evidence isn't just some nice to have, it's the whole game. Here's a great way to think about it. Try to think like an engineer for a second. Imagine an engineer who's building a bridge. Would they ever just assume how much weight it can hold? No way. They would calculate it, test it, and be absolutely sure. In UX, our assumptions are those untested load conditions. If we don't test them, our designs are going to break under the weight of real users. Okay, so that's the theory. But what does this actually look like out in the wild? Let's walk through 3 quick stories. 3 cautionary tales where a logical-sounding assumption led to a really, really flawed product. First step, the classic productivity app. The assumption seems totally obvious, right? People who are using a productivity app must want more ways to be productive, more features, more options, more power. Makes sense. But when you actually do the research, it reveals the complete opposite. Your users are already overwhelmed. What they actually want, what they crave, is fewer decisions and less mental effort, not more buttons and toggles to mess with. And so the result of building on that flawed assumption? You get these bloated, feature-heavy apps that ironically make people feel less productive because they're so complex and just exhausting to use. The app ends up causing the exact problem it was meant to solve. Okay, next up, a fintech app. The common assumption here is that users are just hungry for data. They want to see every chart, every graph, every single nitty-gritty metric about their money. But again, the research often points to a much deeper, more emotional need. A lot of users aren't looking for a data spreadsheet. They're looking for peace of mind. They just want simple reassurance that things are going to be okay, not a fire hose of information that they don't even know how to interpret. So, by designing for the wrong thing, these apps end up creating the very feeling they should be preventing. All those charts and numbers just wind up making users more anxious instead of helping them feel in control. And for our last example, let's talk about a food delivery app. It's so easy to assume that users want this vast, endless marketplace, that they enjoy just leisurely browsing through hundreds and hundreds of restaurants. But come on, let's think about the user's actual situation. They're hungry. A hungry person's #1 goal is not exploration. It's getting food fast. They want to make a quick, confident decision and just get on with it. And the outcome of this flawed assumption is something we've all felt: analysis paralysis. These giant, complex menus and endless choices just slow everything down, leading to frustration and, you guessed it, people just giving up and closing the app. Speed and confidence were the real needs, not endless variety. Okay, so we've seen how damaging these assumptions can be. But the good news is there's a really simple, powerful tool that pros use to fight back. It's called an assumption audit, and it's basically a framework for getting to the truth. Here's how it works. It's just 4 steps. First, you just list out everything, and I mean everything, that you're assuming is true about your users. Step 2, you reframe each of those not as a fact, but as a potential risk to the project. Then, for each one, you ask the most important question: what happens if I'm wrong about this? And finally, you take your biggest, scariest risks and you turn them into direct, concrete research questions. So let's look at what that transformation actually looks like. You might start with a simple assumption. Users want a quick checkout. Okay, fine. The audit forces you to change that into a much more powerful research question, like, okay, but when and why do our users actually abandon the checkout process? See that shift? One is a passive belief. The other is an active mission to find the truth. Now, why does all of this really matter for your career? Because demonstrating this kind of thinking is how you build a portfolio that actually gets you hired. It's about showing your process, not just your pretty final designs. When a recruiter or a hiring manager is looking through your case study, this is what they are really looking for. They want to see that you're aware of your own biases. They want to see that your design decisions are based on evidence. They want to see that you have the humility to be proven wrong and that you can actually grow based on what you learn from users. And this right here is the golden sentence. If you want to sound like a senior designer, this is the story you tell in your case studies. We assumed X was true, but our research showed Y. So we changed direction and did this instead. That narrative shows strategic thinking, not just execution. It proves you're a professional who solves real problems. Look, if you only take one single thing away from this whole explainer, let it be this mantra right here. If you did not test it with real users, it is an assumption, period. That's it. Great UX design is simply the process of systematically and relentlessly replacing those assumptions with cold, hard evidence. So, to wrap this all up, I'll just leave you with this question. Think about whatever project you're working on right now. What is the single biggest, most dangerous assumption that you are building on? Finding it is the first step toward creating something people will actually love. Thanks for tuning in.